What if I told you that, to achieve the success you so desire, there is a secret ingredient that society insists on demonizing? No, I'm not talking about luck, money, or privileged connections. I'm talking about something that, at first glance, seems like a villain, the ego. Yes, that little word that many associate with arrogance, failure, and disconnection with others. But what if I told you that the ego, when well directed, can be your greatest ally on the journey towards your dreams? Imagine for a moment the people you admire. Those who have achieved extraordinary things, what do they have in common? In addition to talent and hard work, many of them carry a confidence that seems unshakable. They are not afraid to stand out, to shine, to take up space, and guess what? This has everything to do with the ego. But not the ego in the bad sense, the one that makes you think you're superior to others. I'm talking about an ego that drives you, that gives you the courage to face challenges and move forward, even when everything seems to fall apart. Now, here's the point that will make you rethink everything. Ego is not the problem. The problem is how we use it. Most people grew up hearing that the ego is something to be avoided, that it makes us arrogant and insufferable. But what if I told you that the ego, when well worked on, can be the key to a life of extraordinary results? What if it's just what you need to take that leap you so desire? Think about it with me. How many times have you stopped doing something because you're afraid of what others would think? How many opportunities have you missed because you doubted your own ability? The ego, when balanced, can be the antidote to this. It gives you the courage to take risks, to expose yourself, to believe that you are capable of achieving great things. But of course, there's a secret to using your ego to your advantage, and that's exactly what we're going to explore next. Imagine the ego as a flame. When poorly controlled, it can burn everything around, destroying relationships and opportunities. But when well directed, this same flame can light the path, warm your motivation, and guide you towards your goals. The secret is to understand that the ego is not something you should extinguish, but rather dominate. He is like a wild horse if you don't know how to ride him. He will knock you down, but if you learn to tame it, it will take you to incredible places. Now, let's talk about something that few consider. The ego is not static. He is not born big or small, good or bad. It is shaped by your experiences, beliefs, and choices. For example, when you face a challenge and overcome it, your ego strengthens in a positive way. He learns that you are capable, that you can trust yourself. On the other hand, when you avoid challenges out of fear of failure, your ego can become fragile, insecure, and even toxic. The question that remains is, how have you been feeding your ego? Another crucial point is that the ego does not act alone. It is directly linked to your self-esteem and the way you see yourself in the world. People with a healthy ego don't need to prove anything to anyone. They know who they are, they recognize their qualities and also their limitations. They are not afraid of making mistakes because they understand that mistakes are part of the process, and most importantly, they don't compare themselves to others. They compete only with themselves, always seeking to evolve, but how to get to that point? How to transform a fragile or excessive ego into a powerful ally? The answer lies in self-knowledge. You need to look inside and understand what really moves you. What makes you wake up every day? What are your deepest values? When you connect your ego to something bigger than yourself, a purpose, a mission, it stops being a burden and becomes a tool for transformation. And here comes a powerful insight. The ego is not your enemy, but it is not your best friend either. It is a reflection of what you believe about yourself. If you see yourself as someone capable, your ego will drive you to act. If you see yourself as someone limited, it will sabotage you. Therefore, it is essential to work on the way you think about yourself. After all, the ego is just a mirror, and what do you see in it? Let's go further. The ego is also linked to your ability to deal with criticism and feedback. People with a balanced ego are not easily offended. They understand that criticism does not define who they are. Instead of reacting with anger or defensiveness, they use the feedback as an opportunity to grow. People with a fragile or inflated ego tend to take everything personally, which prevents them from evolving. Which of these profiles is most like you? Now, think of the ego as a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it atrophies. If you overdo it, it can cause injury. Balance is the key. And how do you exercise this muscle? Through challenges that take you out of your comfort zone, but don't break you. Through goals that motivate you, but that don't paralyze you by the fear of failing. And of course, through a healthy dose of self-criticism and self-compassion. Another fascinating aspect is that the ego can be an inexhaustible source of motivation, but only if you know how to access it. For example, instead of comparing yourself to others, compare yourself to the version of yourself from yesterday. Where were you a year ago? What have you achieved since then? When you start to see your progress, your ego feeds positively, pushing you to go even further. And we cannot forget that the ego also has a dark side. When it is fueled by insecurities or fears, it can become a trap. You begin to seek external validation, worry excessively about the opinions of others, and make decisions based on what people will think, rather than what is best for you. This is the type of ego that needs to be recognized and worked on before it leads you down a path of frustration and regret. Finally, I want to leave you with a reflection. The ego is not something you have, but something you are. It is part of your identity, the way you relate to yourself and the world, and like everything in life, it can be transformed. The question is, are you willing to take on this challenge? Because at the end of the day, success is not just about what you achieve, but about who you become in the process. Another interesting aspect is that the ego is not something you can simply ignore or suppress. It will always be there, even if you try to hide it. The difference is in how you deal with it. Think of the ego as an inner voice. If you don't control her, she may whisper negative things, like, "You're not good enough," or "Don't try, you'll fail." But if you learn to direct that voice, it can become your biggest cheerleader, saying things like, "You can do it," or "Go for it, you're ready." And here's a point that many people don't consider. The ego isn't just about you. It also influences how others see you and how you relate to them. People with a balanced ego inspire trust and respect. They do not need to impose themselves or prove anything, because their presence already communicates security. Those with an unbalanced ego, whether fragile or inflated, tend to create conflicts and push people away. Which of these two scenarios do you want to live? Let's also talk about the role of the ego in resilience. When you face defeat or failure, it is your ego that determines how you will react. A healthy ego allows you to see failure as a learning experience, as a necessary step towards success. A fragile ego can make you give up at the first obstacle, while an inflated ego can blind you to your own mistakes, preventing you from growing with the experience. Which of these reactions suits you best? Now, imagine the ego as a compass. When it is calibrated, it guides you in the right direction, showing you where your priorities and values lie. But when it is unregulated, it can lead you to make impulsive decisions or decisions based on momentary emotions. Therefore, it is essential to adjust this compass regularly, reflecting on your choices and whether they are aligned with who you want to be. And we can't forget that ego also plays an important role in your ability to dream big. People with a well-developed ego are not afraid to aim for things that seem impossible. They understand that, even if they don't reach the final goal, the path will transform them into better versions of themselves. Those with a fragile ego tend to be content with little, afraid of failing or being judged. Which of these mindsets do you want to adopt? Another crucial point is that ego is not something you develop alone. It is influenced by the people around you, the environment you live in, and the experiences you choose to have. For example, if you surround yourself with people who support and challenge you, your ego tends to strengthen in a positive way. But if you are in a toxic environment, where there is only criticism and negativity, it can become a source of insecurity and self-sabotage. What kind of environment are you cultivating for your ego? And here's a secret that few know. The ego can be your greatest ally when facing fear. When you have a balanced ego, it gives you the courage to face situations that scare you, because you trust your ability to deal with whatever comes your way. It doesn't eliminate fear, but it helps you act despite it. And it is precisely at this moment, when you face fear, that growth happens. Finally, I want to challenge you to think of the ego as a tool for authenticity. When you understand and accept your ego, you stop trying to be someone you're not. You stop hiding behind masks or seeking external approval. Instead, you embrace your strengths and weaknesses, understanding that they are both part of who you are. And it is precisely this authenticity that allows you to build true relationships and achieve things that really matter. Now reflect. What are you going to do with this new perspective on the ego? How will you use it to become the best version of yourself? Because at the end of the day, the ego is not the destination, it is just the beginning of the journey.